My name is Faith Johnson. I'm with the North Carolina Department of Transportation, the Operations Program Management Unit. So my group does a lot of mobile data collection. I think we have like about a half dozen active projects right now. And this is Jacob Mao and Brianna Leak. They are embedded contractors from Arcadis. So they work in our office. They're with us all the time. And we're going to talk about the asset inventory collection project, which is the biggest project we have going on right now and for the last year and a half. So basically, the predecessor for this project was something called the Small Pipe Project, which is really misleading because small pipes in DOT world are pipes that are over 48 inches. They're pipes you can really walk through. And that project, we were using ArcPad. It was really kind of spread across the state. I mean, DOT split into 14 divisions, and a lot of our divisions wanted to have this data, but there wasn't a statewide push to get it collected. But now DOT is moving towards a life cycle approach to maintenance and planning. And so in order to be able to do that, we have to have a really good handle on what's out there and what we have. So the scope of the asset inventory collection project is to build an inventory and conduct an assessment of what used to be called small pipes. We're calling them non-MBIS pipes. Maintenance pipes, which are 48 inches and below. Inlets, retaining walls, which are walls that are holding back earth. And noise walls, which you see along many interstates in urban areas. So the customers for this project are our maintenance departments that are spread across the state. And the end goal of the project is to get this data moved into our asset management system, which is Agile Assets based. So at the end of this initial data collection, the data will be migrated there and continue to be maintained, and the ownership will transfer to the maintenance departments. And every year we're going to do a 20% reassessment so we can keep the inventory current. So to get the project underway, we started in June of 2017 with our planning and setup, and that ran through September 2017, which is when the data collection started. So a lot of the setup involved, choosing what kind of hardware and software we were going to use. So at the time, DOT was really pushing for everybody to use Windows tablets as portable devices. So we selected the Dell Latitude, which meant we were kind of, and then we decided to go with Collector. Because it's free. It kind of was like the best mobile software out there, we decided. But one thing to keep note of was that Collector was relatively new in Windows at the time. It had been around longer for Android and iOS. And Collector was new to us. This was our first project with Collector. So it was a really big undertaking. We'd been using ArcPad a lot in the past, and we wanted to kind of move away from that platform. Another part of setup was working with the stakeholders to determine what data we should collect. We had to acquire a lot of reference data that would help the people doing the data collection to identify where the assets were, what they needed to collect. Some of that was some existing past inventories, such as the Small Pipe Project. It took a while just to build the actual databases and put the maps together. Obviously, we had to do a lot of testing on kind of more the assessment side, not the technology side. We had to hire all the teams to actually do the data collection. And we had to purchase equipment, so not just the tablets, but they were using things like lock levels, grade rods, probing rods, angle finders. So as they're going out to collect this data, they've got a lot of other equipment they're carrying with them. And in July 2017, we were in a pilot for 3 weeks. And that was just 2 teams out there doing the project. It was, as if it was in production. And that gave us a chance to kind of come back and reassess things and make a lot of changes. But we did use that pilot data ultimately as part of the project. Phase 1 of the project started in September 2017, and we cut it off in May of 2018. So we hired 52-person teams from 6 different engineering firms distributed across the state. And then the support staff for the project, we had 2 full-time GIS personnel, myself and somebody else on my team that just left recently. And then we had 1 full-time engineer to support the assessment, and then 1 part-time. In January, we hired an additional GIS analyst, that was Jacob, and 3 QA engineers. So, between September and January, we weren't doing any QA on the data being collected. I mean, it was something we wanted to do. We just didn't have the positions available to fill that need at the time. So the extent of phase 1 was to collect all retaining walls and noise walls and all non-MBIS pipes, plus maintenance pipes, so those smaller pipes that are under 48 inches, and inlets on just the primary system. So to give you an idea of how DOT's road network is broken up, we have under 20,000 miles of primary roads and around 65,000 miles of secondary roads. So phase 1 was just knocking out a small portion of the maintenance pipes and inlets. To kick off the project, we conducted 6 training sessions that were on site. So we traveled across the state and held 2-day training sessions. The first day was focused on teaching the technology, teaching the team how to use their tablets and collector, and also setting up the tablets. So being part of state government, there was a lot involved with, logging in and getting everything set up under that user's account. In the afternoon of the first day of training, we covered all the assessment information. And then the second day was just simply field training the whole day. One of the challenges with the training was we were going to different offices across the state where we didn't know kind of what would be available. A lot of the rooms were really small. The internet connections were really slow, so that presented a lot of challenges, being away from our home base, so to speak. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jacob to talk about the next phase.
Sure, yeah. So I was the analyst who came in towards, midway through phase 1. One of my chief responsibilities was going through the post-processing of all the data. So we collected lots and lots of fields for the teams in the field, and we try to limit that as much as possible. So we didn't need them to collect lengths of pipes, things like that. We try to do as much as possible on the back end. So from June to September, we were making sure we get through and populate all those fields, like length. It could be they collected, damages and other problems with the pipes. So giving each pipe inlet grades as good, fair, poor, determine how soon maintenance will need to go out and replace or repair a pipe. And then starting in September, we began our trainings for phase 2, which was wrapping up around 30% of phase 1 and completing all maintenance pipes and inlets on the secondary mileage. We condensed the training, so we did have a number of returning teams and condensed it into 1 day. So rather than having 1 day for in-office training and 1 day for field training, we split into morning and afternoon. Let's see. So we opted to stay with Collector. One of the ways we were trying to mitigate any sort of issues was to go with Collector Classic, since that was what was best for Windows devices. Opted to use the most up-to-date version at the time of our launch of phase 2, but kind of control the auto updates, try to keep everybody on the same version to mitigate different versioning issues that might arrive as we would push out updates to Collector. Opted to host all the data online in AGOL, pushing out different views that are available for the teams in the field versus the managers and ourselves in the office. We opted to slim down the schema a ton to be able to speed up the process of collecting. Teams are out there trying to collect 50 fields for a noise wall. It takes them like an hour. We want to focus on getting through the project completely, as well as limiting the amount of errors you might have if you're filling out tons and tons of fields. So phase one, you can see, involved a huge amount of features. Phase two, we're projecting to be over twice as many features, right? So we wanted to get through all of it. That's our primary goal. Get through all of it and keep it as accurate as possible through that process. So as Faith mentioned, a few of the lessons we learned for the trainings, rather than go out to each field office and things like that, we brought all the teams into Raleigh to our office. So we had both control over like all our resources, as well as reduce the cost of having to travel and dealing with, like Faith mentioned, slow Wi-Fi, things like that. We opted to, as much as possible, work online rather than having teams work offline and sync in an office or with a Wi-Fi connection. Our goal with that is just to reduce the cost of having to bring teams into the office, as well as losing data in sync. I guess we'll go over we had some sync issues when working offline in the past. We wanted to mitigate that as much as possible. Reduce the schema, like I said, keep it fast, focus on completion, and focus on quality. We also gave all the teams email addresses and DOT email addresses as a way to kind of mass communicate with all of them. And we wanted to incorporate the QA teams earlier. Like Faith mentioned, they didn't have QA teams out helping the field teams for the first, third of the project. So we wanted to incorporate the QA engineers as early as possible to make sure that we're getting high quality data and the teams are doing, not missing pipes, things like that. As far as data publication, in phase one, all the stakeholders had to wait until we were completely done with the project and had post-processed it before they had access to it. So that means they knew that the project was going on for the entire year, but they couldn't see it until we were done with it. Phase two, we are opting to update as we go so the stakeholders can see progress and actually have access to these things they need, especially they need to see, these pipes are failing. They can get a jump start on it now rather than having to wait until October. Brianna, I'm going to go over some of that.
So one of the things that we really struggled with during this project is the technology portion. Now, a lot of the people that we're working with that are doing this project for us are not technology advanced people. A lot of them are retired DOT. If they have a cell phone, we're doing pretty good. But a lot of them don't know the technology. It's really unfamiliar and they're really uncomfortable with it. There's also the sense that we're having difficulty providing the support that these people need because, we're currently using Skype as our method of seeing what's wrong and trying to figure it out from that aspect. One of the things that you also have to consider is when you're talking to them and you're like, okay, please describe to me what's wrong. They're just like, it's broke. And you're like, okay, can you give me a little bit more than that? And so it's constantly trying to pull little pieces so you can figure out which lane you're trying to go in to help them. Another difficulty is I've been helping them, and we all have with a lot of the technical portion, but we also have to work with the state IT policies and work around that. We have their procedures that we have to work around, and these people are they have to remember 3 passwords. And sometimes they change the passwords at different times, so they could have 3 different passwords to remember at any time, and not all of them have the same password requirements. So there can be a lot of mix-up, and then you lose out on time and money when we're having to wait on them getting their password reset and having to figure out what's wrong with all of their stuff. Another issue that we've had is these tablets have to stay connected to the network. and we've talked to IT, and so we're currently having issues figuring out how long that these tablets need to stay connected so that our people out in the field are not having issues with being kicked off of the network and then having to go through the whole IT procedure again, which usually takes a little bit of time. We've also, as you guys can understand, the Windows tablets get updates, and when they get updates, they're not necessarily good updates. And we've been experiencing a lot of problems with it updating a GPS driver, and then we don't have GPS. And so we've been fighting with that, and so far we managed to figure out what drivers work and make sure that we have those on the tablet and preventing the GPS driver updates. And that also flows into another issue that we're having, and that's with figuring out whether we have a Dell issue, a DOT issue, or a Verizon issue, because all these tablets are running off of Verizon signal. And so trying to troubleshoot which part of it is the part that broke is also been kind of a little bit of a learning curve for us. The other is communication issues. For us to get to all of these people, our main form of communication is email. But that's just one more piece of technology that people have to bring into the equation. And a lot of these people are not checking their emails, which has caused some disruptions for us, because it's our main form of communication, and if they're not reading it, then we're not really successfully being able to tell them what's going on. We dropped this in because on one of our assets, this was the picture. We didn't get a picture of an asset. This was one of the pictures that was attached to one of the assets. And so we thought this would be a good explanation of like the tech users and like what we're seeing out in the field. So currently in our project, we started with Windows tablets. And to say that we had some issues with the Windows tablets is a little bit of an understatement. We have since agreed to go to iPads, but there were some hurdles there too. One of the great things about the iPads is it's got a lot better Esri support, because Esri supported iPads a lot sooner than they supported the Windows software. It's got such a much larger base of people using it that Esri's more willing to sit down with you, talk over what's going on, and fix the bugs. Another thing that we also liked about it is the Windows tablet has a keyboard that you have to rip off and reattach, which has a connection issue after so long. The iPad has such an intuitive keyboard design that as soon as you touch an item, it brings up the virtual keyboard, and it does it so much better than the Windows tablet does. Another thing that we liked is they're slightly smaller than the Windows tablet, but they're so much easier for the men to be able to carry. We have special cases where they can sling it around their shoulder and go into the ravines, because as Faith was explaining, they have so much equipment, and if they have to hold on to a bulky tablet, it's just that much more like trouble that we run into, especially because we have a lot of smash tablets because people have dropped them. So that's us losing money because people are fumbling with trying to keep the tablet. But like I said, we had our own issues getting to the iPad. In order for us to get the iPad, we had to do a major IT change. IT at the time would not allow us to have iTunes. So it was a lot of work and a lot of people to try to get IT to accept that we needed iTunes and that this was the best thing for the project. And when that happened, we got some iPads, and I can guarantee you that the feedback from our field crews have been stellar. Every single person that we've given the iPad to has come into the office to tell me, man, I'm so glad I got this. This is the best thing I've had yet. Just to go over a few of the issues that we did have with the Windows tablet is the touch screen on the tablet is going out on all of them, some faster than others. Our main issue is that there's an issue with the touch screen at the bottom. so that you can't restart your computer and you have to constantly have the keyboard, which makes mobility for people so much worse. So we had some issues with that. And we also had issues with people constantly losing their Verizon wireless. So we're paying money each month for people to have Verizon and then the tablet not even be able to use it. And we've also been having problems with people constantly losing their APN settings. And that also ties in with the fact that the Windows tablets have not been consistently getting GPS either. And then the fact that, as I explained, we've had issues with updates for the drivers ruining the GPS. And it's just like another small thing is that iPad has got a very intuitive design, and a lot of the people who have been using the tablets are unfamiliar with Windows 10. So that's another thing to take into consideration. And back to Jacob.
Okay, I'll go really quickly. So some other challenges we ran into were limiting to the schema that functions with AGOL. So as we're trying to keep track of who is adding assets as we go, who's adding it, what they're adding, and when they're adding it. But if we go in and do this updates, like I mentioned, to push out published data for the stakeholders, we have to go and process that. And so if we do that without turning off edit tracking, we just write over everything. We lose all those fields. So we kind of have to push everything into maintenance windows to run all our update scripts so we don't override everything. Also, we ran into some issues with recovery. Our solution to that was to do all of our own backups. The Ezra recovery only gave us a JSON file, which did not have the hundreds of thousands of asset pictures, the attachments, which are one of the most important things that our stakeholders were requesting. So part of the challenges of processing the data in place is making sure that we can actually keep collection ongoing and not waiting. So to do that, we used the ArcGIS API for Python. It's basically a Pythonic library that lets you edit your GIS, your web-hosted GIS. I use it to both access, update features, and basically do all of that post-processing to populate all those fields that we are populating on the back end rather than having the teams fill out. So another challenge with post-processing was that we have, as I mentioned, overriding edit tracking. Also, when we're doing this, like these are thousands and thousands of assets with attachments, a lot of times processing it over a weekend or something like that when teams aren't in the data, we experience timeouts just because like how huge the data is. So we've had to kind of integrate a lot of loops and email notifications to let us know when something breaks so we can get in and fix it. And finally, with a lot of the sync errors for people working offline, when they push it, the data might go through and still give them the sync error. We're not sure, so we have to usually pull down runtime geodatabases, which is what Collector uses rather than like a .gdb. So we have to recover those, convert it to a regular geodatabase. Sometimes we found there are like duplicate features. Oops, look, duplicate features, and we have to actually get in there using various software solutions to try to actually recover data in the first place. Sorry, I spoiled there.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of like running out of time. Okay. Well, yeah. Yeah.
We're stuck here.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free to get up and leave. I probably would. But, I'm going to skip some of this stuff because this is not as much on the technology side. This is a dashboard we use that's really helped us to, Jacob built this. This has helped us keep track, not only to see if we're on schedule, but we can like drill down to individual users and see how many miles per day they're doing so we can kind of help keep track of the teams that way. I don't want to just briefly talk about some of the software defects we've run into and kind of some of our workarounds. So one thing I wasn't aware of when we went live with phase 1 was that if you have a required field with a domain, collector's going to just default to basically like a space. So it sees that the field is populated, but that value is not within the domain. So when you go to synchronize, you're going to start having errors, and that really kind of crippled our whole project. And the way to work around that is you just need to go into the service definition within AGOL and put in null as a default value. And then it'll force the user to actually put something in, pick something from the drop down. Another thing we ran into this year was that editing a feature would cause attachments to get stripped. So if you edited a feature that had an attachment, every other feature you edited from that layer since you started collector would lose its attachments. So our workaround for that was to teach the users that once you use that pencil tool, you need to reopen your map, and that kind of clears that out so that doesn't happen. Let me see if I can go back. Most recently, the one that's really stumped us is we keep getting reports from our users that there's assets that they've collected that have since disappeared. So we've been working with Esri on this, but we haven't been able to figure out what's happening. But something that clues us in that they really did do the work is we're looking at the data and seeing that there's missing object IDs. We're seeing that a lot of time lapse between the previous and next feature. So we're believing them that something's going on. We just don't know how to recreate the issue. We've given them spray paint so we can keep track of like what they've actually collected and compare to what's in the data. And then we've been plagued by sync issues. Really, we're at the point where we're just trying to work online, so we don't spend a lot of time diagnosing these because the error messages are really vague. We just kind of try to get the data off the tablet, incorporate it, and move on. We don't have them a lot since we're working online more. So I'll give it back to Brianna for a brief conclusion.
In conclusion, we wanted to talk to you guys about what we felt worked well for us. What worked well is we have weekly meetings, and later on, we also included QA, and this was an excellent way for us to piece together on specifically like on our sides, users that we've talked to on a regular basis who may need more help from QA, and now we can direct QA to go talk to them. And it really helped everybody stay on the same page and talk about what we're working on, what our goals are for the future. It also helped with accountability. QA is now doing report cards, so we're finding out how they're doing on collecting things, if they're missing assets, so we know how well the people in the field are doing. On the other hand, we're also working very closely with the firm managers and working with them and the people who are actually out in the field to resolve issues. Another thing that we felt that we did pretty well and was a good strength for us is we have a lot of tech manuals, and each of the groups was giving, and they were given their own tech manual. So if they had any questions, they could go and use that. And we have manuals for many other things to reference. We have an inventory database, so we know where any of our tablets are at a given time. If they're being repaired, if they're at IT, we know where all of our assets are. We're also keeping an issues list, so we know what issues we're having when we had them, and so we can keep track of what issues we're having. Another thing is that we've been sending out reminders, we've been sending out emails, and as we've been getting people to actually check their emails, that has been actually really helping us along with our project. And a few of the last things is we all come from different backgrounds and different experiences, and so we really feel like that has really helped piece together different aspects of the project for us. Benefits is everything that has been collected is going to be available to DOT via AGOL. And this will assist maintenance people with planning. They'll be able to find, address structure failures, and this can also be used for emergency and pre-construction planning. And last, we're only about 40% of the way through the project, and the below little image shows you about how much phase 1 was, what phase 2 is, and we've got a lot to go. So this is just us telling you where we're at with the project and hoping that this might help you with your projects as well. So.
If you guys want to come, we'll stand up here for a little bit if you want to come ask us questions, but thanks for sticking around.